Hello and welcome to the first of this AI mini-series from ACCA. My name is Yogesh Dhanak. I am the Technical Advisory Manager at ACCA UK. And with me we've got today Eriona Bajrakurtaj and Alexis Kingsbury. So I'll let Eriona introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. As Yogesh said, my name is Eriona. I'm a Managing Director of Majors Accounts & Co., which is a family-run accountancy practice based in South East London. I'm also the Chair of the ACCA UK Practitioners Network panel, and I'm doing a lot of work with other accountancy firms, with my other firm called Vault Digital Transformation, helping firms to change the way that they're working within their businesses like I did with mine. So doing a lot of work with AI, and so I'm really excited to be here and have this discussion.
Cool. Hi, I'm Alexis Kingsbury. I'm a serial entrepreneur and management consultant, and I did a slightly strange thing of building the world's first 100% AI accountancy firm as an experiment, just to see what was possible, what would work, what wouldn't work. And then, weirdly, it turned into a book that I wrote about the experience called A Cruel Intentions.
Great. So, Alexis, I think let's just start us off. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of AI in the industry, in the accountancy industry especially. So just help us demystify what AI means to the accountancy industry.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that when people think about AI, often they just conflate that with basically ChatGPT. And often when they think about ChatGPT, they're thinking of chat, like I type in a thing, it responds. AI as a field is huge and includes all sorts of different aspects of machine learning and so on. But if we focus on a lot of the area that has suddenly become sort of more known to people and what's having its greatest impact in the accountancy industry, I think you can kind of group it into, so yes, the chat bots, but increasingly I think people are starting to learn how to use agentic AI, where essentially you can set up AI to do things, like whether it's through the chat or whether it's set up through some process or a recurring scheduled job, to actually do things on your computer or with the tools that you use, whether it's creating files, deleting files, updating all these things. That becomes a big change versus just saying, oh, can you help me redraft this email that I've got? But then there are multiple tiers of different ways in which you can use AI in even more advanced ways, whether it's part of existing workflows or creating even AI team members, as I did with my experiment. But then also you've got other areas of AI that don't get talked about as much, which is often called narrow AI. So a lot of what we talk about with ChatGPT and Claude and so on, we're talking about these large language models that are pursuing generalist intelligence, but actually some of the perhaps more exciting, potentially lucrative areas are what we'd call narrow AI. So for example, where you've got artificial intelligence that's helping with things like protein folding in the area of health, which you're not getting that out of having a little conversation with ChatGPT. So there's lots of different ways in which AI can be used in our lives, and in many ways it's kind of embedded in some of our tools, but also there's lots of ways in which we can be using AI to help us achieve some really amazing things in our businesses and in our day-to-day lives.
I was going to say, we went to an event together recent, a few months ago, where someone actually offered you a lot of money not to release what you had done. So there is that fear that, yes, AI can do some of these smaller things with ChatGPT, but on the other side of the spectrum, it's, well, what is it going to do? It's going to take our roles, right? We're not going to be here anymore because the AI employees, as you've done with your fully AI practice, is going to take over what we do. And I don't think that's exactly, the mindset that we should have, because I think it can be a huge asset to us. Not that it's going to take over everything that we do, but it should be. I'm treating it almost as the AI assistant to each team member. So they're being able to do their work a lot better, a lot faster, a lot cleaner, and helping them to progress through with their own career progression. It's not taking as long to get to where they would want to as it has done traditionally, for example. Have you found that from speaking to other accountants where they're like, oh no, so that means I'm not needed anymore?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So firstly, I got in quite a lot of trouble with my wife for turning down the £2 million not to put the book out. But the reason I felt that it's important to write it as a book and share it with the world was exactly that point, was that through the journey, through the experiment that I went through, there was a point about halfway through, and therefore fittingly halfway into the book, where my big question changed from what can AI do to now it can do everything. What are humans for?
Yeah.
And that was existentially terrifying. And fortunately, I carried on the experiment and came to a conclusion of, this is what humans for. This is what it means for us. And no, it doesn't mean that AI just replaces accountants and replaces accountancy. It replaces or changes the processes that we're doing, the tasks that we're doing. And so as a result, you still need humans. You still need humans for judgment and defining what's even what good looks like and what's worth doing and providing that taste and so on. But you need it for customer relationships and all these sorts. Like there's still loads of different areas that you do need humans for, even if you can appropriately adopt AI to do everything else. And that is a big if. There's plenty of people that have spent the last 6 months saying, okay, I've experimented. Still don't know whether I'm getting return on investment on this.
Yeah.
And so I think and it's non-obvious. Like I think that's one of the big challenges is that people assume that what's required is this investment in technology, and we need IT people to be leading this in our organizations. And typically, actually, it's a leadership and management challenge. And that was what I sort of experienced over and over through my journey, was that actually often I was the bottleneck, which completely contradicts an argument that says, oh, well, it replaces the humans, is that over and over, I was the bottleneck. I needed to decide something and shape the next piece of direction, or review something, or provide some feedback, or join the dots and connect things, or decide even the context around what we did. Like all of that is stuff that the AI needed me to do. And I think that's where we're going next, is that to some extent, everyone becomes a manager of AI. Like you described how the way you're thinking about it is having an AI assistant, and actually then each of your team members has an AI assistant. I would anticipate that actually they may end up with multiple AI team members, each with defined roles and permissions and so on that are very specific to what's there. But as a result, we need people to be applying management to that. And one of the challenges I think that comes up for a lot of people in the context of demystifying and people worrying about jobs is that people worry particularly about junior roles, because you might say, oh, well, yes, of course you need people for customer relationship judgment and so on, but that's all senior. That's all, when you've got experience. What about for junior jobs? This is going to just sort of destroy all of this. And I don't think that's true either.
Yeah.
I think, you were talking about an example when the calculator came along, for example.
Exactly. I think AI, I'm treating it as another tool, right? When the calculator first came along, everyone said, oh, we don't need accountants anymore. We can add things up ourselves and a lot quicker. But accountants still stayed. Then the internet came along and people could submit things to HMRC online. And the question there was, do we need accountants anymore? Because I could follow the forms that are online and do it myself. But accountants are still needed. And I think now this is just the next tool, which is going to, again, evolve, and our roles evolves how we're working with business owners, which means that I think we're going to be even more valuable than before, because we're not just providing some figures that are historical. Now we are fully embedded in clients' businesses because we have the time available to actually understand what's going on, right? And that's where we will have the biggest impact, because we're with them in real time, understanding what's happening and being able to hand them 3-4 decisions that they can make now, not a year later once everything is done. They've missed the opportunities, or if something's gone wrong, it's too late. There's nothing we can do there. So I think this is a tool that will make us so much better, but it also means that as accountants, we have an even more important role, because we need to focus on our expertise, what we have actually been learning, studying qualifications like ACCA. I think in the past, so many people haven't even been able to put that into practice until maybe even 10 years into their career, because they were too busy focused on get physical receipts, unfold them, copy the data in, but none of that is anything to do with what we've learned in qualifications that we're studying, right? We're studying to look at, whole sets of figures and accounts and understand what the business is doing, take those figures, translate it for our customer, and then help them make decisions. But we don't get to see that right now until much later on. So that's being brought forward. And I think we're going to get a lot more value from our team members a lot earlier. But also they should be able to get a lot better in terms of job satisfaction in what they're doing and feel like actually the time I've spent studying was worth it because I'm seeing that come into practice.
Yeah. It's almost as if, the role has now got to evolve from being the compliance person in accounts to more the business advisor, and how, AI can be useful in that respect is what we're all about.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that I really like as well, Eriona, your point around this kind of assumption of, once the client, the business person, whatever, can do this thing themselves, then they won't want the accountant. And I think that it speaks to an innate human mistaken thinking that we have, which is that once we're good at a thing, or if we like doing a thing, we sort of assume other people will find it equally as easy and will be willing to do it. And I think that accounting as a profession, as an industry, tends to underappreciate how much most people in the rest of the business don't want to deal with finances and numbers. And there's this assumption that, but once they can, they will. That's not the reality. And as a serial entrepreneur, if I always concluded that, if I can do something, I will do that, I'd never grow a single business, and certainly not be able to grow multiple ones that I'm then not operationally required in. And so I think that assumption of thinking, if they don't need an accountant to do it, then they will use it. Exactly. The only way in which you grow the business is really to delegate and work out what's valuable to a client, work backwards to work out how you deliver that efficiently, and then create a system, including people and now increasingly AI team members and workflows, that then delivers that reliably. And then make sure you've got some kind of feedback loops that means that doesn't go stale and falls out of step with the market. All of that still exists. Like that, AI doesn't change that setup. All it does is actually changes the economics of what you can do. And I think that's one of the crucial bits I learned in the experiment was it suddenly becomes possible to do things that, and it sounds like nuanced or it sounds counterintuitive. It's like, I didn't save that much time when I was using AI because it was less about taking something I was going to do anyway and making it efficient. It was more about doing things that I never would have done.
Yeah.
And they suddenly become possible. Like an example from outside the accountancy industry, I've got a friend who is a game developer and he builds indie games. And what he loves is building games, coming up with concepts for games, building the game, working out the tricky bits and so on. And AI tends to be helpful a bit, but not that much in that process because so much of it relies on his creativity and his problem solving, and he's solving novel problems that aren't available out there to just, solve easily. And so most of that doesn't involve AI. And then he publishes the game and makes some money and so on. There's a really easy way in which you can make more money, which is to serve that same game, but on a different console. Maybe on an iPhone or an Android phone, etc. But porting, taking that game and putting it on those is boring, really boring and painful because you basically spend all of your time shouting at what's called an SDK, like the environment that is designed to be able to run the game on that device. That's not fun. AI is brilliant at that because it's well documented. And you've got a definition of done that's really effective because you know exactly how the game works on this other thing. And so you can say, I need it working like that, but on this device. And so he's taken porting, moving those games over, that would have taken 3 months and he'd have hated it. So wouldn't have done it, crucially, and done it in 48 hours with minimal involvement from him. And that's the shift in thinking. So when you're thinking for an accountancy industry, it becomes producing various reports, cash flow forecasts, management accounts, all those sorts of things. All of this becomes trivial. I mean, much of it already was. If you've got good, if your bookkeeping's in good shape, then you can produce out of these reporting platforms. But in many ways, that even if you didn't have them in good shape, now it becomes even more possible. You can take that export out of that legacy bookkeeping system and quite easily get it into a format that then works. But it changes the economics of how you work. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest shifts for a lot of those, particularly accountancy firms rather than accountants in the within existing businesses, is what happens if you've been billing per hour, per client, per producing, for a particular service. What happens when actually a lot of the work is in the building around it and the organization and so on, and then the report just gets produced at the end of it. And to some extent, a lot of cloud computing has already been changing that model. And so there's plenty of accountancy firms that have changed to subscription and so on. But AI really changes that in terms of the whole economics of how you work. And I think that's the threat and the opportunity in one, is that opportunity to deliver huge amounts of more value to your clients, but at the same time completely threatening the existing operating model that we've got.
One thing I'd add to that is the expectation from clients.
Yeah.
They know that we have these tools available and they're getting used to having things at their fingertips in all areas of their lives. They expect the same in their business. So those who are not approaching AI with the right kind of mindset in looking at how it can assist what we can do better and faster, so we can provide what our clients now expect to have at any point, it is going to be difficult for them to compete when a client needs it now.
Agreed. And I think that it reminds me of about probably 20 years ago when I was working with a finance function at a big pharmaceutical firm. And I was working on two simultaneous projects. One was helping them to make their month end more efficient. And there was resistance because they were kind of saying, well, what will we do? Right? So there's this awkwardness around we're making this efficient. And then a separate project with exactly the same team was around how do we provide better management information reporting to the directors because they didn't value the existing reporting. And the pushback I got there was, if we give them more and better information, they'll only ask more questions. But that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
The whole point is to add the value so they can ask more and better questions. And if you're an accountancy practice, that's then advisory work that you want. So the mistake is to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, AI is taking away my work, and forget where the work is going, which is often higher value work. There is a very different return on investment equation in the business leader's head when they're looking at the production of a set of accounts or working papers or bookkeeping versus help me make a decision about whether I should be buying or building this particular asset and when I should be seeking investment.
So I suppose, to conclude this particular episode, we can surmise that AI tools, there are various different tools. It's not limited to simply just ChatGPT or one or other tools like that. There's a vast array of tools that people can use in their business. But again, to Eriona's point about, client expectations and the speed of delivery of advice, I suppose there'll be dangers there within that environment, which practitioners will need to be careful of. And perhaps we'll talk more about that in our next session. And then we'll obviously cover things like, how businesses can really get into using AI very quickly and getting that return on that investment that you talked about for the best of their abilities. So thank you very much for this episode, and we'll be seeing you soon. Thank you.
Report